Good morning, it's early o'clock in sunny Milton Keynes. Once again, we are back at Wargames Workshop and I'm doing yet another one of these tournament vlogs. This is our last game of 2024, so just a little nice relaxing one. We've got a very low points limit of 750 points rather than 1250, which is now standard for 3rd edition bolt action. But what that means is that I've had a thought, because I always have a thought, I always have some interesting thing to do with the list building, and today is no different, because in 2nd edition with 1000 points, I kind of came to the conclusion that I needed a minimum, or kind of the way I play, it works best with a minimum of 30 infantry. And up to 1250 for 3rd edition, I've kind of thought probably that should go up to about 40, and that seems to work quite well, as we saw with my victory last month. But at 750, that means it's like 20-25? But I thought, instead of going for kind of what I think is optimal or kind of the minimum, let's just go all out. And I haven't actually gone all out. I haven't gone for like 2 complete rifle platoons at 750 points. What I've actually done is I've gone for 1 full rifle platoon. So I've got 45 nearly, over 40 infantry and 750 points and just 2 vehicles. I have no anti-tank at all in this list. And we're playing a small game, so I shouldn't be facing anything big, but that does mean that something like a medium tank, a light tank, a pair of light tanks, which I might come up against, yeah, that could cause a problem for me. But I'm going to put my weight in the infantry, and I'm going to see how well that does. I have, specifically for the list today, I'm bringing the Italians. I've got 2 regular rifle squads and an Alpini squad. The Alpini aren't even painted yet. They have a 1 light machine gun in each squad, and I've got my old Bersaglieri with a submachine gun on board for them. And my vehicles, and an LT by his lonesome. And my vehicles, I've brought a brand new that I've painted up recently, L3 flamethrower tankette, which should be a bit of fun, and is probably the only chance I have of taking out enemy vehicles. And a tankette that's slow is probably not going to get there. But we'll see how that goes. I've also got the old-fashioned AB-41 with the autocannon armoured car, which I like. I've had some fun with that before. But I need to go and help set up tables, so I'll see you later on. Okay then, let's discuss the first game first. That sort of makes sense, right? This board is heavily forested, with only 1 building on a short side, and this makes for a lot of soft cover, a lot of slow movement because of rough ground, and especially difficult for wheeled vehicles who have to go all the way around every piece of terrain. We had 5 objectives, and from the point of view of my opponent and myself, we had a very different idea of how to approach this game. On my right hand side is this open ground with 3 objectives around it, one of which was on my table edge, so very easy for me to start there and take that one and then take the one in front of the building, but more importantly I could easily defend this area as well and then push into the center of the board, and with those 3 objectives I should win the game. My opponent had a plan that really messed that around, because for them the open ground means that they can advance some decent weapons-based unit, like a tank for example, and shoot everything all at once from that kind of tree line, causing me all sorts of problems. Where the 2 objectives on the other side of the board would be absolutely easy for them to take, and that would give them the advantage. Well, I focused pretty heavily on the open ground at the beginning, like I thought was such a good idea, but my opponent focused more centrally. They got their Panzer III in that perfect position, truly a dominating position, and that limited my ability to move realistically on the entire right hand flank, as I have no real anti-tank. My little flamer tankette had a go, cleared out the sniper and then charged off for the Panzer III. Really the only option to take it out, so I lined it up, I waited for the best timing, I went for a hopeful last die first die activation. It was my only hope, but unfortunately my opponent got the first die in the next turn, leaving that Panzer III with all of the open sight lines and nothing that could hurt it. And so what I had to do is really change my plan as quickly as I could. Now, I did get a unit on each of those objectives, and they just went down over and over again for the rest of the game, and they were safe-ish unless the Panzer came really close into point-blank range, which thankfully they decided not to do. And that means that not a lot of my army was facing the bulk of theirs. But the terrain played into my favour here. The limited sightlines and almost universal soft cover mean the numbers advantage that my opponent had wasn't actually helping them. But my veteran infantry got to shine. The Bersaglieri on the left-hand flank, I put them there as a little distraction, well, they ended up being quite important. They did get a little bit distracted shooting at this truck over and over again that they really should have ignored, but at the end of the game, not only had they taken out a squad and an officer, they held that furthest objective, one that I really didn't think I'd managed to take. The middle, on the other hand, didn't go my way, and my push of units from the flank to the middle was just not effective, facing the larger numbers of my opponent, and that left the centre objective open. I even lost the Autoblinder to the Panzer III as they abandoned the foregone conclusion of my right flank in the last turns of the game. But with 5 objectives in total, and me having 2 on the right and 1 on the left, means I actually won this game, as much as a struggle as it had been. My second game was over in a flash, just a really quick game. And this is both because my opponent is an experienced player, so thinks in advance and makes their moves quite efficiently, but it was also due to the game type. And yes, this is the same board as the first game, but at least I got to play on the other side, so it's at least a little more interesting. We had to score points by getting units off of the opponent's board edge, which would kind of be difficult for me due to the terrain and my force being mostly slow infantry. So my plan was to push up in the middle as much as I could, which would give me the option of offending my opponent on either flank, and so I could slow them down, and that would allow me to push in the other direction to hopefully get some stuff off the board and score points. And that didn't really work. My right side was really effective. My AB-41 and the Alpini took out some Paracaduzzi before escaping the board, so I did get some points, at least, at the end of the game. But the squad in the middle really absorbed all of the attention of the Semovente and some other units before kind of running past it and trying to escape. And strangely, the Semovente not being able to roll higher than 2 on its hits rolls actually means that they also got off of the board edge. And so that's great. I scored a bunch of points, and the right side of my centre push did really nicely. Unfortunately, alas, and for shame, the left side of my force had not fared anywhere near so well. My opponent, kind of sensing my plan probably, saw a weak spot and focused their force on my left, harassing the Bersaglieri, but not quite wiping them out. They did wipe out the regular rifle squad on this side and also my little tankette, and that left them a great big opening with a nice straight line through it, and all of their units ran off of this part of the board, and that meant quite a few more points to my opponent than I was able to score, resulting in me losing. My last game? Well, the last table I played on was a bit of a meme. The tournament organiser had set this one up to punish us, it seems. It was all solid hardcover in these long straight lines giving a lot of open sightline. And the way I saw it is that you could either sit back and have a tennis match, which my force is really not designed for, or you charge in and had an impossible to control scrap in the middle, which I might be better at with all my infantry, but I'm not really close combat focused. My opponent and myself, we both decided to just go for that scrap. The Italian special rule of starting the game in ambush was nice, but I didn't really get the advantage of it, and essentially I pushed my opponent into a blob, and in this kind of knife fight, well, a blob beats a thin line. We all got stuck in, and with very little in the way of sophisticated tactics, I simply wanted to get as many of my units as I could focused on one of the enemy at a time, and that's difficult against a blob of an opponent. When their light tank, yet another Panzer III, rolled around the side, took out my AB-41 and then an infantry squad, and the scrap in the middle was not going my way. I did a fair amount of damage, as you would expect in this kind of a scrap, but I was losing unit after unit, And even the Alpini, who hadn't taken a casualty in the previous 2 games, well, they got the attention of the entire enemy force right here and just got themselves wiped out. My only surviving model was my officer, who bravely fled the battlefield entirely. Just as I discussed my conclusions, I actually took some photographs of some other people's games, so you'll enjoy those in the background. I scored overall just below the middle of the pack, which is unsurprising me as I hadn't fared well in my games. This infantry heavy list does have its advantages, but also has its failings, like mobility, but also, more relevantly, no anti-tank. Some of my tactical choices would have been sound if I'd have had some support, some mobility, especially in some way to take out some enemy armour, but that's a mistake on my part. I tried to play this as a normal list instead of playing it to the advantages of an infantry heavy force. It was still, however, fun, and we had a good few laughs, and I'm looking forward to next month where we're playing our own version of Tank War in version 3. So this month I learned that infantry can be very powerful, but they can't do all things by themselves, and supporting them is important. But also, when bringing a strange or focused list like this, you have to play to its strengths and not just try to cover its weaknesses. Well, I'll remind you again to go out and have some fun playing games, because playing games is fun. Even when you're losing, you can have a good laugh. But I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.